Everyone in the Silver Moon Pack smelled the rot of death, but Victoria smelled the truth. Standing at the edge of the massive grave, watching the first shovel of dirt fall onto the obsidian casket of the Alpha King, she knew a secret that could get her killed. They said King Alaric died of a heart attack. They said his reign was over. But as the heavy lid was sealed, Victoria didn't hear silence. She heard a heartbeat, a faint, terrified rhythm drumming against the wood. He wasn't a corpse. He was a prisoner in his own coffin. And she was the only one brave enough or foolish enough to stop the burial. The rain over the Blackwood territory didn't just fall. It felt like the sky was weeping specifically for the fall of a titan. The funeral of Alpha King Alaric Blackwood was the largest event the supernatural world had seen in a century. Thousands of wolves, dignitaries, and rival alphas had gathered on the sprawling lawns of the Blackwood estate. The scent of wet wool, expensive lilies, and deep, pervasive grief hung heavy in the air, masking the sharper metallic tang of impending political chaos. Victoria Vance stood at the very back of the crowd, her cheap black rain slicker, a stark contrast to the tailored Italian suits and designer dresses worn by the high-ranking wolves near the front. As an Omega, the lowest of the low within the pack hierarchy, she wasn't even supposed to be here. She worked in the kitchens of the manor, scrubbing pots and peeling potatoes, invisible to the powerful elites who ran the world. But Alaric had been different. Victoria shivered, pulling her hood tighter. She remembered the one time the Alpha King had spoken to her. It was late 3 months ago. She had been scrubbing the floors of the grand hallway at 2 a.m. He had walked in exhausted from a summit, smelling of pine and power. Instead of stepping on her or ignoring her, he had stopped. He had asked her name. He had thanked her. The foundation of this pack isn't the crown, Victoria, he had said, his voice, a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. It's the people who keep the house standing. Now that voice was silenced, or so they said. The officiant, a high-ranking elder named Marcus, stood by the open grave. Beside him stood Lord Thorn Sterling, the Alpha's beta and cousin. Thorn was handsome in a sharp, predatory way. His blonde hair was slicked back, and his blue eyes scanned the crowd with a look that didn't resemble mourning. It looked like calculation. "We commit Alpha Alaric to the earth," Elder Marcus intoned his voice, amplified by a microphone system that echoed across the valley. A leader taken too soon. A heart that gave out under the weight of the crown. A collective sob rippled through the crowd. But Victoria frowned. Her nose twitched. Being an Omega meant she was physically weaker than the others, but it came with a trade-off. Her senses were heightened, a survival mechanism. She could smell a storm 3 days away. She could smell a lie on a person's breath. And right now, as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of the open mahogany casket before they lowered it, she smelled something wrong. Death had a specific smell. It was the scent of decay, of cells breaking down, a sulphurous finality. Alaric didn't smell like death. Underneath the heavy layers of embalming flowers and formaldehyde they had likely sprayed on him, she smelled sweat. She smelled fear. She smelled the distinct, acrid chemical scent of wolfsbane mixed with something sweet like paralytic nightshade. But most terrifying of all, she heard it. It was faint, so faint that the thunder overhead almost drowned it out. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. It was slow, agonizingly slow, but it was there. "He's heavily sedated," Victoria whispered to herself, her hands trembling. "Quiet, Omega." A large warrior growled next to her, shoving her shoulder. "Show some respect." Victoria stumbled, but regained her footing. She looked at Thorn Sterling. The beta was gripping a handful of dirt, ready to cast the first stone. His face was a mask of solemnity, but his heart rate, which Victoria could hear from 50 yards away, was steady. Too steady. He wasn't grieving. He was waiting. As his second, Thorn announced, his voice smooth like oiled glass. "I accept the burden of leading this pack through the darkness. Goodbye, cousin." Thorn raised his hand. The hydraulic lift began to hiss. The coffin, shiny and black under the grey sky, began to lower into the 6-foot hole. Panic, cold and electric, shot through Victoria's veins. If that coffin went down, if that dirt was piled on top, the oxygen would run out in an hour. Alaric wasn't dead yet, but he would be. He would wake up in the dark, paralyzed, screaming silently as he suffocated. The injustice of it burned in her throat. The man who had looked her in the eye and thanked her. The only alpha who hadn't treated the Omegas like furniture. She looked around. The warriors were stoic. The elders were weeping. No one else smelled it. No one else heard the faint rhythm of his heart. They don't know, she realized, or the ones who do know are in on it. The coffin was now waist-deep in the earth. Thorn threw the handful of dirt. It hit the lid with a hollow thud. Victoria didn't think. She didn't plan. The instinct to protect, usually dormant in an Omega, flared up like a supernova. She bolted. She broke through the line of mourners, her wet sneakers slipping on the grass. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice cracking but piercing through the drone of the rain. "Stop the burial!" The crowd gasped. It was a sound like all the air being sucked out of the valley. Heads turned. Warriors bristled. Thorn froze his hand halfway to grabbing another shovel. Victoria didn't stop running until she was at the edge of the grave, breathless, her hair plastered to her face. She pointed a shaking finger at the descending coffin. "He isn't dead," she shrieked. "Don't you bury him. He isn't dead." The silence that followed her scream was heavier than the casket. For 3 seconds, the only sound was the hydraulic hiss of the lowering device and the drumming rain. Then the outrage exploded. "Sacrilege!" An elder shouted. "Get that filth away from the king!" A noble woman screeched, clutching her pearls. Thorn Sterling's face twisted. For a split second, Victoria saw pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes before it was replaced by a mask of fury. "Seize her!" Thorn roared, pointing at Victoria. "She disrupts the Alpha's rest. Kill her for this treason." 2 massive enforcer wolves, men the size of refrigerators in black suits, lunged at her. Victoria scrambled back, slipping in the mud near the edge of the grave. "I can hear him!" she yelled, desperate to be heard over the clamor. "Listen to me. He's drugged. It's Nightshade. Can't you smell it?" One of the enforcers grabbed her by the back of her rain slicker. He yanked her so hard her feet left the ground. "Shut your mouth, Omega trash!" He snarled, his canines extending. "Wait!" The voice belonged to Elder Marcus. The old wolf stepped forward, raising his cane. The enforcer paused, holding Victoria dangling in the air like a rag doll. "This is a grave accusation," Marcus said, his eyes narrowing at Victoria. "To interrupt the king's funeral is a death sentence, girl. You understand this." "I don't care," Victoria cried, tears mixing with the rain on her face. She looked Marcus dead in the eye. "If I'm wrong, kill me right here. Throw me in the hole with him. But if I'm right, and you bury him, you are burying your king alive. Can you live with that doubt, Elder?" The crowd murmured. The certainty in her voice, the sheer desperation, struck a chord. Wolves were creatures of instinct, and Victoria was vibrating with the truth. Thorn stepped down from the dais, marching towards them. "This is ridiculous. She is mentally unstable. She works in the scullery. She's been obsessed with Alaric for years. It's a delusion. Proceed with the burial." "Why are you in such a hurry, Thorn?" Victoria spat out. The adrenaline made her bold. "Are you afraid he'll wake up?" Thorn growled a low, vibrating sound that made the nearby humans flinch. He raised his hand to strike her, his claws extending. "I will silence you myself." I said, "Wait." Elder Marcus slammed his cane into the mud. The sound was like a gunshot. As the eldest member of the council, his authority superseded even the betas in times of transition. Marcus looked at the coffin, which had stopped descending halfway down. He looked at Thorn, noting the sweat on the beta's brow despite the cold rain. Then he looked at Victoria. "Bring the coffin up," Marcus ordered. "This is madness," Thorn hissed. "You act on the whims of a dishwasher." "If she is wrong, I will snap her neck myself," Marcus said coldly. "Raise it." The hydraulic gears whined in reverse. Slowly, agonizingly, the black obsidian casket rose back to the surface. The rain slicked its surface. "Open it," Marcus commanded. The crowd held its breath. Thousands of eyes were glued to the lid. 2 warriors stepped forward and undid the silver latches. With a heavy groan of expensive wood and vacuum seals, the lid was lifted. King Alaric lay there. He was pale, terrifyingly so. His dark hair was arranged perfectly against the white satin pillow. His hands were folded over his chest, holding a family sword. He looked dead. He looked like a marble statue. Thorn let out a breath that sounded like a laugh. "See, he is cold. He is gone. This is a mockery." He turned to the enforcer holding Victoria. "Rip her throat out." The enforcer tightened his grip on Victoria's neck. She choked, clawing at his massive hand. "No," she wheezed. "Touch his neck." She kicked out her boot, connecting with the enforcer's shin. He grunted, loosening his grip just enough for her to drop to the muddy grass. She didn't run away. She lunged into the casket. Gasps of horror erupted. Victoria scrambled over the side, her dirty hands landing on the king's pristine velvet suit. She was sobbing now. She pressed her ear directly against his chest, ignoring the icy coldness of his skin. "Get her off him!" Thorn screamed, his composure shattering. Victoria closed her eyes. The world fell away. The rain, the screaming crowd, the hands grabbing at her legs to drag her away. Thump! There, thump! It was weaker than before. He was fading. The lack of air in the sealed box had almost finished what the poison started. "He's alive!" Victoria screamed into the king's chest. She sat up wild-eyed, grabbing Alaric's cold hand and holding it up. Look at his fingernails. The nail beds are pinking up because the pressure is changing. He's alive." Elder Marcus moved faster than his age should have allowed. He shoved Thorn aside and leaned over the casket. He placed 2 fingers on the Alpha's carotid artery. The valley went silent. 5 seconds passed. 10. Thorn was backing away slowly, his hand reaching into his jacket pocket, likely for a phone or a weapon. Elder Marcus's eyes went wide. He looked up, his face pale as a sheet. "He has a pulse!" Marcus whispered. Then he roared, his voice shaking the trees. "He has a pulse! Get the medic, now!" Pandemonium broke out. The enforcer released Victoria, looking at her with awe and terror. Victoria collapsed against the side of the casket, shaking uncontrollably. She watched as the medical team, who had been standing by for the ceremonial pronunciation, rushed forward with stretchers and defibrillators. They pulled Alaric's limp body from the coffin. "Get the oxygen," a medic shouted. "His heart rate is 4 beats per minute. He's in metabolic suspension." Thorn Sterling stood frozen. His plan, months in the making, meticulously crafted with rare poisons imported from the witch covens of the East, had been shattered by a girl who scrubbed his floors. He looked at Victoria. She was on her knees in the mud, watching the medics work on the king. Thorn's eyes narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated hatred. He thought his wolf pacing angrily in his mind. "You little rat, you just signed your death warrant." "Secure the area," Marcus barked. "Nobody leaves Take the King to the medical wing immediately, and someone get that girl a blanket. She goes with him." "She goes with him," Thorn interjected, trying to regain control. "Elder, she is a contamination risk. She is a nobody. I will take over the King's care." "You—" Marcus turned on Thorn, his voice low and dangerous. "We're about to bury him alive, Thorn. You will step back, or I will have the enforcers detain you for incompetence." Thorn clamped his jaw shut. He couldn't fight the council yet. Not here. Not in front of the whole pack. He nodded stiffly. "As you wish. My only concern is for my cousin." Victoria felt a blanket being draped over her shoulders. She was shivering violently, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. She looked up to see Dr. Aris, the pack's head physician, looking at her intently. "You said wolfsbane and nightshade." Dr. Aris said, his voice urgent. "How did you know?" I smelled it," Victoria stammered. "Under the lilies, it smelled like bitter almonds and burning sugar." Dr. Aris nodded, turning to his team. "Prepare the atropine and charcoal protocols. We need to flush his system. If it's nightshade, we have less than an hour before permanent brain damage sets in." They loaded Alaric onto a gurney and began sprinting toward the manor. Victoria scrambled to her feet, running alongside them, her hand still tingling from where she had touched the king. She had saved him from the grave. But as she looked back and saw Thorn watching her from the rainy cemetery, his silhouette dark and ominous against the grey sky, she knew the real danger had just begun. Stopping the funeral was the easy part. Keeping the king alive while the man who tried to kill him watched from the shadows. That was going to be impossible. The medical wing of Blackwood Manor was a state-of-the-art facility, humming with the quiet efficiency of cutting-edge technology and ancient pack-healing arts. But tonight it was a whirlwind of frantic energy. Dr. Aris, a seasoned wolf with a stern but kind face, barked orders, his hands moving with practiced speed. Victoria was ushered into an observation room, given a change of dry clothes and a mug of hot tea. She sat on the edge of a pristine white bed, listening to the muffled sounds of the medical team working on Alaric in the next room. Her body was still shaking, but her mind was racing. Nightshade. Wolfsbane, she murmured, remembering the distinct scents. She tried to replay the last few months. Alaric had been growing weaker, they said. More irritable. His decisions had become erratic. The council attributed it to the stress of leadership. Victoria now knew it was poison. Someone had been slowly poisoning the Alpha King for months, likely escalating the dosage for the final fatal blow. Hugh Thorn was the obvious culprit. He was beta cousin and next in line. He stood to gain everything. But how could he have gotten the poisons in Alaric, had his own personal chef, his own tasters? "What's your name, child?" Victoria looked up. Elder Marcus stood in the doorway, his ancient eyes piercing. He still looked shaken. "Victoria Vance Elder," she replied, her voice soft. "I work in the kitchens." "Indeed." Marcus walked in slowly, his cane thudding softly on the polished floor. "You did a remarkable thing, Victoria. Foolish, perhaps, but undeniably courageous. Many will call you a hero. Many more will call you a lunatic." "I only did what was right," she said, clutching the warm mug. "I heard his heart. I smelled the poison." "Your senses are keen," Marcus mused. "Unusually so for an Omega." "I've always been like this," Victoria admitted. "It's hard to ignore things other people miss. A blessing and a curse, I imagine." Marcus sat heavily in a chair opposite her. "The medics are working on flushing the toxins. Dr. Aris is confident, given the prompt intervention, that King Alaric will recover." Victoria let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank the goddess. Indeed. But now Victoria, We have a bigger problem. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Whoever did this, they are still out there, and they will know you foiled their plan. You have made a powerful enemy. I know, she whispered, remembering Thorn's venomous gaze. You cannot go back to your duties in the scullery, Marcus continued. It's too dangerous. I am placing you under the direct protection of the Royal Guard. You will remain here in the medical wing until we uncover the full truth. Victoria's eyes widened. The Royal Guard, but I'm just an Omega. Today, Omega, you saved the Alpha King. That makes you something far more important than your rank. Marcus stood. Rest. Dr. Aris will want to speak with you when he is finished with the king. He may need more information about what you smelled. As Marcus left, Victoria lay back, trying to process it all. Victoria Vance Kitchen Omega was now under Royal Guard protection. It felt like a dream, or a nightmare. Hours passed. The sounds from Alaric's room grew less frantic, more rhythmic. Eventually the door opened, and Dr. Aris emerged, looking exhausted but triumphant. He's stable, Dr. Aris announced to a small group of waiting elders and royal guards. The atropine is working. We managed to counter the Nightshade's paralytic effects and are flushing the wolfsbane. He'll be unconscious for some time while his body recovers, but he will live. A collective sigh of relief filled the hallway. Dr. Aris then turned to Victoria. Victoria, come in here, please. With a pounding heart, Victoria entered the king's room. Alaric lay on a pristine bed, hooked up to an array of monitors. He was still pale, but the greenish tinge was gone, replaced by a more natural, if still sickly hue. His chest rose and fell evenly. What you smelled saved his life, Dr. Aris said, gesturing to the monitors. The combination of wolfsbane, which dampens a wolf's healing and senses, and nightshade, a powerful paralytic, was designed to mimic death and ensure suffocation. An insidious plot. Victoria walked closer to the bed, drawn by an invisible force. She looked at the man she had saved. Even in his weakened state, Alaric exuded a powerful aura. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark, wind-swept hair and sharp, chiseled features. She had only ever seen him from afar or briefly in passing. Now seeing him so vulnerable, so close, a strange sensation bloomed in her chest. His heart rate is still low, but stable, Dr. Aris continued. We're going to run a full blood panel in the morning, check for any lingering toxins. But there's something else, Victoria. Dr. Aris's voice dropped, his expression serious. He motioned for Victoria to come to the side of the bed. When we were stabilizing him, his vitals were crashing. We used a defibrillator. Just as we initiated the shock, Dr. Aris paused, looking intently at Victoria. Something very unusual happened. His wolf reacted. It was like a jolt of pure energy. Victoria frowned, confused. What do you mean? When a wolf's life is in critical danger, especially an alpha's, sometimes their inner wolf will lash out, sending out a powerful instinctive pulse of energy to find its mate. Dr. Aris took a deep breath. It's a primordial survival mechanism. The inner wolf seeks its other half to anchor itself to life. Victoria felt a prickle of unease. And just as his heart was restarting, Dr. Aris continued, his gaze fixed on her. The monitors registered an unusual spike, an energy signature brief but undeniable. It's like his wolf sent out a desperate beacon. Victoria swallowed hard. Her stomach was doing flip-flops. Why are you telling me this, Dr. Aris? Because, Victoria. Dr. Aris's voice was barely a whisper. At the exact moment of that energetic pulse, your heart rate, which was being monitored in the next room, spiked dramatically. And then when we finally stabilized the king, your heart rate immediately normalized. It mirrored his. Exactly. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. No, it couldn't be. An Omega, the Alpha King. It was unthinkable. That's impossible, she stammered. I'm an Omega. The king already has a designated Luna, Lady Seraphina. Lady Seraphina is a beta of a prominent rival pack, Dr. Aris corrected gently. Their union was a political arrangement, not a true mate bond. And the lunar ceremony has not yet taken place. It was scheduled for next month. Victoria looked from Dr. Aris to the sleeping king, then back to the doctor. Are you saying? I'm saying Victoria Vance. Dr. Aris stated, his voice now firm, that the Alpha King, Alaric Blackwood's wolf, has chosen you. You are his true mate. The words hung in the air, heavy with destiny and dread. Victoria felt a chill colder than the rain outside run down her spine. The mate bond was sacred, undeniable, a force of nature. But for an Omega to be mated to the Alpha King, it would shatter the pack's entire social structure. It would incite outrage. It would make her a target, not just for Thorn, but for anyone who saw her as an affront to tradition. She was no longer just the girl who saved the king. She was now the Omega, who could become his queen. And that was a far more dangerous position to be in. News of King Alaric's miraculous resurrection and the Omega girl who facilitated it spread like wildfire through the Blackwood territory and beyond. Whispers turned to rumors, rumors to outright declarations. By morning, the entire pack knew that Alaric Blackwood was alive and that Victoria Vance, the scullery maid, had stopped his burial. What they didn't know yet was the mate bond. Elder Marcus and Dr. Aris had decided to keep that bombshell under wraps for now. The pack was too volatile, too shocked to absorb another unprecedented revelation. The immediate priority was uncovering who tried to kill the king. Thorn Sterling, however, was not content to sit idly by. He was a master manipulator, and while his public image had taken a hit, he still held significant power as the acting beta. He began to spin a counter-narrative. The Omega is unstable, he told a gathering of lower-ranking alphas and influential pack members in the Grand Hall. She clearly suffers from delusions. King Alaric was merely in a deep coma brought on by exhaustion. She in her frenzy simply appeared to be saving him. But Thorn, a young Gamma, challenged. Elder Marcus confirmed the pulse. Dr. Aris confirmed the poisons. Thorn scoffed, running a hand through his impeccably styled hair. Marcus is an old man prone to theatrics, and Aris, he's a scientist. He saw a few anomalous readings and a hysterical Omega yelling about poisons, and he concocted a narrative that suited the drama. No one saw the poison administered. No one saw an attacker. He paused, letting his words sink in. The truth is, this Omega Victoria Vance has always been unusually fixated on the king. Perhaps she engineered this whole scenario to gain attention, to gain proximity. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Thorn was playing on deep-seated prejudices. An Omega could never ascend. An Omega was not to be trusted in matters of state. Their role was to serve, not to save. Meanwhile, Victoria remained under guard in the medical wing. Two stern-faced Royal Guards brothers named Liam and Owen stood sentinel outside her door. They treated her with respect, a stark contrast to how she had been treated her entire life. But the weight of their gaze, the knowledge that her presence here was stirring up a hornet's nest, made her uncomfortable. Dr. Aris visited her frequently, taking her statements, asking about the sense, the timing. He was compiling a detailed report. He also observed her, closely confirming the subtle shifts in her vitals that mirrored Alaric's own. He had no doubt about the mate bond. One afternoon, as Victoria was sketching in a notebook, a habit she had picked up to calm her nerves, a new visitor arrived. Lady Seraphina. Seraphina was stunning, tall with flowing blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a figure that seemed sculpted by the gods. She wore a custom-made dress that accentuated her alpha lineage and regal bearing. She was everything Victoria was not: privileged, powerful, and poised. Seraphina dismissed the guards with a wave of her hand. Liam and Owen hesitated, looking at Victoria for a sign. Victoria nodded, a tremor of fear in her stomach. She knew this confrontation was inevitable. Victoria Vance. Seraphina said, her voice like ice, yet perfectly modulated. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She didn't even sit. She simply stared at Victoria, her blue eyes dissecting her. The kitchen wench turned hero, a remarkable story. Lady Seraphina, Victoria replied, rising slowly. Her Omega instinct screamed at her to bow, to lower her gaze, but something deep inside, perhaps Alaric's wolf now stirring within her, made her hold her ground. Let's not waste time. Seraphina continued, a faint sneer playing on her lips. I know about the mate bond. Dr. Aris, bless his scientific heart, is incapable of keeping such a seismic secret from those who need to know. Victoria's breath hitched. It cannot be true. Oh, it's true, Seraphina said, stepping closer, her scent of expensive perfume and beta power filling the small room. His wolf chose you, a dirty, unranked Omega. The insult to my family, to my pack, is unforgivable. I never sought this, Victoria whispered, her hands clenching. I only saved him. And for that you will be rewarded, Seraphina conceded, surprising Victoria. A small fortune, a comfortable cottage away from the manor, perhaps even a new life in another territory under the protection of a minor alpha. But this connection, it will be severed. Severed! Victoria repeated, a cold dread washing over her. How Seraphina smiled, a chilling, calculating expression. The mate bond, while powerful, can be redirected. With the right rituals, with the right will, the king is still unconscious. He will awaken believing his bond is with me, his intended Luna. You will simply disappear. Victoria felt a wave of nausea. You wouldn't dare. It's an abomination, a violation of the sacred bond. The sacred bond is a fairy tale for Omegas and pups, Victoria, Seraphina scoffed. For alphas it is a tool, and this alpha needs a Luna who can bring alliances power and respect to his reign. Not a kitchen servant who causes scandal. Your presence alone threatens the stability of this pack. But if he wakes up and feels the true bond, he'll know, Victoria argued. He will wake up weak, confused and susceptible to suggestion, Seraphina countered. He will be told you saved his life, yes, but that you were paid handsomely and sent away for your efforts, that you tried to claim a false mate bond to usurp my place. His weakened wolf will believe it. You are a monster, Victoria cried, her voice rising. I am a queen, Victoria, and I will do what is necessary to protect my future and the future of this pack. Seraphina leaned in close, her eyes glittering with cold malice. You have two choices. Accept your golden parachute and vanish, or fight me and find yourself buried in a hole far deeper than Alaric's, with no one to mourn you. Seraphina straightened her imperious gaze, raking over Victoria one last time. Think carefully, Omega. You may have saved the king's life, but you cannot save yourself from the forces that will crush you if you stand in my way. With that, Seraphina turned and swept out of the room, leaving behind the lingering scent of her power and the chilling threat of her words. Victoria sank back onto the bed, her mind reeling. She had gained a powerful ally in Elder Marcus, and potentially the king himself, but she had also garnered the hatred of Thorn Sterling and the ruthless machinations of Lady Seraphina. She was trapped in a web of lies and power plays, and she, a simple Omega, felt utterly out of her depth. 3 days later, King Alaric stirred. The news spread like lightning through the manor. Victoria, who had been unable to sleep properly, her senses hyper-attuned to every subtle shift in Alaric's vitals, felt a jolt go through her. It wasn't just the monitors telling her, it was a profound internal thrum. He's waking up. Dr. Aris and Elder Marcus were immediately by his side. Victoria, under strict instruction from Marcus to stay close, watched from the doorway. Alaric's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. His dark eyes, clouded by drugs and confusion, blinked against the soft light. "Alaric," Dr. Aris said gently. "Can you hear me?" A low groan escaped the king's lips. He tried to move, but his muscles were still weak. His eyes, unfocused, scanned the room. "You've been very ill, my king," Marcus said, his voice laced with relief. "But you are safe now." Alaric's gaze landed on Victoria, standing nervously in the doorway. For a brief moment, a flicker of recognition, a spark of something intense passed between them. A connection she felt deep in her bones. His wolf, still groggy, was stirring. "Who?" Alaric croaked his voice, rough from disuse. Before he could finish, Lady Seraphina appeared, pushing past Victoria in the doorway. She was dressed in a soft, flowing gown, her hair perfectly coiffed, looking like an ethereal vision of comfort. She went directly to Alaric's bedside, taking his hand. "My dearest Alaric." She cooed, her voice sweet as honey. "Thank the goddess you're awake. It was a terrible ordeal. We were so worried. But I never left your side." Victoria felt a pang of betrayal, even though she knew Seraphina was lying. She could feel Alaric's confusion, his wolf's attempts to orient itself. This was the moment Seraphina planned to exploit. Alaric looked at Seraphina, then back at Victoria, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. The mate bond so strong between them in his unconscious state was now battling against the fog of his recovery and Seraphina's practiced manipulation. "Seraphina," he rasped. "What happened?" "You had a terrible collapse, my king," Seraphina said, stroking his hand. "A heart attack brought on by the immense stress of your duties. It was a miracle you survived." She shot a venomous glance at Victoria. Thankfully, the pack's healers intervened just in time. "And this Omega caused a scene at your funeral, disrupting the ceremony to make a false claim that you were poisoned." She was hysterical. Victoria felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She could almost see the threads of Seraphina's lie weaving around Alaric's weakened mind. "Poisoned!" Alaric mumbled, a frown forming on his brow. He tried to remember, but the toxins and sedation had ravaged his memory. "A delusion, my love," Seraphina purred, squeezing his hand. "Do not worry your head about such things. You are safe. I am here. Your Beta Thorn has been handling all pack affairs with unwavering loyalty." Just then, Thorn Sterling entered the room, looking relieved, but also subtly triumphant. He nodded to Seraphina. "My king," Thorn said, approaching the bed. "A blessing to see you awake. The pack has been in disarray, but I have done my best to maintain order in your absence." He gave Victoria a look that promised retribution. "And it seems the little Omega who caused such a fuss is still lingering. Perhaps she should be removed so you can rest in peace." Alaric looked at Victoria again. The initial spark was gone, replaced by a hazy confusion. Seraphina's words, Thorn's authoritative presence, were creating a wall between them. "Omega," Alaric murmured, his voice stronger now, but still laced with uncertainty. "What is your name?" Victoria felt her heart sink. He didn't remember. Seraphina's plan was working. "Victoria Vance, my king," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I work in the kitchens." "She claimed you were poisoned." Thorn interjected his voice, carrying just enough authority to sound reasonable. "She created a scene. She disrupted your funeral, my king." Alaric closed his eyes, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was trying to piece together the fragments of memory, the instincts of his wolf, but the fog was too thick. Dr. Aris stepped forward, interjecting calmly. "My king, with all due respect, Victoria Vance's keen senses allowed her to detect the presence of wolfsbane and nightshade in your system. Her intervention was crucial." "You were poisoned." Seraphina shot daggers at Dr. Aris. Thorn's jaw tightened. Alaric's eyes flew open. He looked at Dr. Aris, then at Victoria. "Poisoned!" He repeated, a flicker of genuine shock and anger entering his gaze. "By whom?" "That is what we are investigating, my king," Elder Marcus interjected, stepping up to the bed. "But there is no doubt of the toxins. Victoria's instincts were correct." Seraphina glared at Marcus and Aris. Her carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. Thorn, however, moved quickly. Seeing his plan to discredit Victoria failing, he seized on Alaric's anger. "It is a grave accusation, my king, and we must find the culprit. Perhaps this Omega has more to tell us. She seemed so certain." He smiled, a cold, predatory flash of teeth. "Perhaps she knows who did it. Or perhaps she herself was involved." The accusation hung in the air, chilling and insidious. Victoria gasped. Alaric's eyes still clouded, but now with suspicion turned fully to Victoria. The bond which had briefly flared seemed to recede. "No," Victoria cried. "I saved you. Why would I poison you?" "That's a question we must investigate," Thorn said smoothly. Her convenient appearance, her dramatic claims, and now the king's miraculous recovery which she takes credit for. It's too neat, isn't it? A desperate Omega seeking status and power. Alaric looked from Thorn to Victoria, his confusion warring with a dawning suspicion. He was an alpha. He was trained to be suspicious to protect his pack, and Thorn was his trusted beta, his cousin. "Elder Marcus," Alaric said, his voice weak but firm. "I need answers. Until then, Victoria Vance, you are to be kept under guard, confined to these quarters. Do not leave this wing. If you are innocent, you will be cleared. If you are not—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implied threat was clear. Victoria felt the world tilt. Thorn had turned the tables. He had sown doubt, used her Omega status against her, and put her under house arrest. She had saved the king, and now she was a prime suspect in his attempted murder. As Liam and Owen, the royal guards, now looked at her with a new somber expression, Victoria knew her battle for the king's trust, and her own survival had just begun. The mate bond, if it even had a chance to bloom, was now buried under layers of suspicion and fear. The confinement room in the medical wing was comfortable, a guest suite, really, but to Victoria it felt like a cage. The door was locked from the outside. The windows were reinforced glass. Liam and Owen, the royal guards, stood duty in the corridor, their shadows visible under the doorframe. 2 days had passed since Alaric woke up. 2 days of silence. Victoria paced the room, her mind a frantic loop of fear and frustration. She could feel Alaric. That was the most terrifying part. The mate bond, which Seraphina had tried to dismiss as a fairy tale, was a living, breathing tether between them. She felt his confusion, a heavy, muddy sensation in the back of her mind. She felt his physical weakness, and she felt his growing suspicion, a sharp spike of anxiety that wasn't her own. He was getting worse again. Dr. Aris had been barred from seeing her. Elder Marcus was reportedly in meetings with the council, likely being stonewalled by Thorn. Victoria was isolated. Late that night, the lock on her door clicked. Victoria spun around, expecting a meal tray. Instead, the door opened to reveal Thorn Sterling. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. He was dressed in dark, tactical gear, the kind enforcers wore for night raids. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The air in the room instantly grew heavy. "You're persistent, little mouse," Thorn said, his voice a low, smooth rumble. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked resigned, like a man checking off a chore on a list. "What do you want?" Victoria backed away until her legs hit the edge of the bed. "I came to say goodbye," Thorn smiled, stepping closer. "And to thank you, in a way. Your little stunt at the funeral forced my hand. It made things messier. But chaos is a ladder, as they say." Victoria's nose twitched. Underneath his expensive cologne and the scent of rain, she smelled it again. That sickly, sweet, bitter aroma. Nightshade. But this time it was fresh, potent. It was on his hands. "You have it on you," she whispered, her eyes widening. "You're going to do it again." Thorn glanced at his gloved hands. Keen senses. It's a shame to waste such a talent. Yes, Alaric is having a relapse tonight. His heart, weakened by the initial attack, will simply give out in his sleep. Dr. Aris is conveniently occupied with a sudden emergency in the lower village of fire I had arranged. By the time he returns, the king will be cold. And you... He pulled a small, silenced pistol from his belt. It wasn't a wolf's weapon. It was a coward's weapon. "You grief-stricken by your failed attempt to manipulate the king, and the realization of your crime will have taken your own life in this room. A tragic end to a delusional Omega." Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "They won't believe it. Elder Marcus knows. The bond! The bond is a myth you made up." Thorn snapped, his composure cracking for a second. "And Marcus is an old fool who will fall in line once I am Alpha. Seraphina is already preparing the statement." He raised the gun. Victoria didn't think. She didn't plead. She let out a scream, not a human scream, but a raw, psychic cry through the bond she shared with Alaric. It was a blast of pure terror and warning sent with every ounce of her will. Alaric Thorn pulled the trigger. Phut! The bullet shattered the vase next to Victoria's head as she dove to the floor. She scrambled, rolling under the bed. "Don't make this difficult," Thorn sighed, walking around the bed. "It only hurts for a second." Suddenly the door burst open. It wasn't Alaric, he was too weak. It was Liam, the royal guard. "Lord Thorn." Liam stood in the doorway, confusion written all over his face. He saw the gun. He saw Victoria cowering under the bed. "What is the meaning of this?" "She attacked me." Thorn lied smoothly, keeping the gun trained on the bed. "She's armed. Stand down, soldier. Leave this to me." Liam hesitated. He looked at Thorn, then at the terrified Omega. He remembered the girl who had jumped into a grave to save his king. He remembered the smell of poison she had identified. "No," Liam said firmly, his hand moving to his own sidearm. "Holster your weapon, Lord Thorn. By order of Elder Marcus, the prisoner is to be unharmed." "I am your future Alpha," Thorn roared, spinning around and firing. The bullet caught Liam in the shoulder. The guard grunted, stumbling back, but he didn't fall. He roared, shifting partially, his eyes turning amber. He lunged at Thorn. Victoria didn't wait to see who won. She scrambled out from under the bed and bolted into the hallway. "Get back here!" Thorn shouted, throwing Liam off him with supernatural strength. Victoria ran. She didn't run for the exit. She didn't run for safety. She ran toward the king's suite. The hallways were strangely empty. Thorn must have dismissed the night rotation. Her bare feet slapped against the cold marble. She could smell the fresh nightshade wafting from the king's room ahead. Someone else was there. Seraphina. Victoria burst through the double doors of the royal suite. The scene before her was a nightmare. Alaric was thrashing in his bed, his face grey sweat pouring down his forehead. Seraphina stood over him, a syringe in her hand, trying to find a vein in his arm. "Hold still, you stubborn beast!" Seraphina hissed. "Get away from him!" Victoria screamed. Seraphina spun around, her eyes wide. You should be dead!" Victoria didn't stop. She tackled Seraphina. It was a mismatch of epic proportions. Seraphina was a high-born beta, trained in combat. Victoria was a malnourished Omega scullery maid. Seraphina backhanded her effortlessly, sending Victoria flying across the room. She crashed into a side-table glass, shattering around her. "Pathetic!" Seraphina sneered, turning back to Alaric. "I'll finish him. Then I'll finish you." Victoria gasped for breath pain radiating through her ribs. She looked at Alaric. His eyes were open, fixed on her. They were glazed with pain, but deep within them something was igniting. A golden fire. He had felt her fear. He had felt her pain when she hit the table. "Mine," a voice growled in Victoria's head. Not her voice. His. Victoria forced herself up. She grabbed a shard of the broken glass. "I said, get away from my mate." She lunged again, this time fueled by a surge of adrenaline and the desperate energy of the bond. She was faster. She slashed out the glass, catching Seraphina's arm. Seraphina shrieked, dropping the syringe. It rolled across the floor. Enraged, Seraphina shifted. Her bones cracked and reshaped fur sprouting as she transformed into a large golden wolf. She snarled, baring fangs that could snap Victoria in two. Victoria stood her ground before the king's bed, shaking, bleeding, but refusing to move. She was the only shield he had. Seraphina sprang, but she never reached Victoria. A low, thunderous growl shook the very foundations of the manor. A hand thick with muscle and pulsing with alpha power shot out from the bed and grabbed the mid-air wolf by the throat. King Alaric sat up. The air in the room crackled with static electricity. The pressure was immense, the sheer weight of an Alpha Prime's aura fully unleashed. Alaric didn't just hold Seraphina's wolf form. He crushed the air from her windpipe with one hand. His eyes were no longer human. They were glowing pools of molten gold, the sign of the Wolf King in full command. The drugs were burned away by the sheer inferno of his rage. He threw Seraphina across the room. She hit the far wall with a sickening crunch and shifted back into her human form, gasping and broken. "You touched her." Alaric's voice was a tectonic rumble deeper than the ocean. He wasn't looking at Seraphina. He was looking at Victoria. He swung his legs out of bed. He was unsteady, his body still recovering from the long-term poisoning, but his will was iron. He took a step toward Victoria, who was bleeding from her lip and clutching her ribs. "Alaric," she whispered. He reached out his large hand, cupping her face. The contact sent a shock wave through them, both a warm, golden light that seemed to knit their souls together. The bond snapped into place, rigid and unbreakable. "I feel you," he murmured, wiping blood from her lip with his thumb. "I remember. The grave. The darkness. You were the only light." The doors blew open again. Thorn stood there, his tactical vest, torn blood dripping from where Liam had bitten him. He held his gun, leveling it at Alaric's back. "It ends now," Thorn screamed, his sanity gone. "Die!" "No!" Victoria threw herself in front of Alaric, just as the gun went off. The bullet didn't hit her. Alaric had moved with a speed that defied physics. He spun, catching the bullet in his shoulder, a flesh wound to an alpha, and continued his momentum to cross the room in a blur of motion. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He slammed into Thorn like a freight train. Thorn flew backward into the hallway, skidding across the polished floor. Alaric was on him instantly. He picked Thorn up by his tactical vest and slammed him into the stone wall, cracking the masonry. "I gave you my trust!" Alaric roared, his voice echoing through the entire wing. "I gave you my blood, and you tried to kill my mate. She's an Omega." Thorn wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. "She is nothing. She is my queen," Alaric snarled. He raised a clawed hand, ready to deliver the executioner's blow. "Alaric, wait!" It was Victoria. She stood in the doorway, supported by Liam, who had limped up the stairs. "Don't kill him," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Not like this. Not in the shadows. Let the pack see. Let them see what he is." Alaric froze. His chest heaved. The golden light in his eyes dimmed slightly, returning to a dark, intense brown. He looked at Victoria, seeing the wisdom in her eyes. If he killed Thorn now, it could be spun as a madness-induced rage. A trial would expose the truth. He dropped Thorn to the floor. The beta collapsed, broken and defeated. "Take him," Alaric ordered the gathering guards, who were now running down the hall, alerted by the noise. "And take the woman in my chambers, to the dungeons. Iron chains, wolfsbane suppressors." He turned back to Victoria. The rage melted from his face, replaced by a look of profound awe. He walked back to her, ignoring his bleeding shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "I'll heal," Victoria said, a small smile touching her lips. "I'm tougher than I look." Alaric sank to his knees before her. The hallway went silent. The guards, the medical staff, everyone froze. The Alpha King was kneeling before an Omega. "You saved me from the earth," Alaric said, taking her small, rough hands in his. "You saved me from the poison, and you saved me from the darkness of my own mind. I didn't believe in the fates until I heard your heart beating against my coffin." "I only did what was right," Victoria whispered, tears spilling over. "No." Alaric shook his head. "You did what was impossible. You are the strongest wolf in this pack, Victoria Vance." He kissed her hands, sending a wave of acceptance and claim through the bond that made every wolf in the vicinity lower their heads in submission. "The pack will not accept this easily," Victoria warned him, terrified and elated all at once. "An Omega Luna." Alaric stood, pulling her up with him. He wrapped his arm around her waist, supporting her, claiming her. He looked at the gathered crowd guard staff and Elder Marcus, who had just arrived, breathless. "Let them try to deny it," Alaric declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "They saw the betrayal of the highborn. Now they will see the loyalty of the true-hearted. Anyone who questions my mate questions me." He looked down at her, his eyes warm. "Let's go home, Victoria. The real one. Not this hospital." 6 months later. The grand hall of Blackwood Manor had never looked more beautiful. The scent of lilies was gone, replaced by the fresh smell of pine-roasted meat and joy. Victoria stood on the balcony overlooking the packlands. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue silver thread, woven through it like starlight. She wasn't hiding in the kitchen anymore. The transition hadn't been easy. There were whispers, cold shoulders, and political pushback. But the trial of Thorn and Seraphina had silenced the loudest critics. The evidence was overwhelming receipts for the poison, the testimony of the royal guards and Thorn's own confession. In exchange for escaping the death penalty, he was banished to the rogue lands, instead a fate arguably worse. But what really won the pack over wasn't the politics, it was the changes Victoria made. As Luna, she had abolished the harsh caste system that mistreated Omegas. She improved the living conditions for the lower ranks. She instituted school programs and better food distribution. The pack was healthier, stronger, and more unified than it had been in generations. They realized that strength wasn't just about claws and teeth, it was about care. Thinking about escaping. Victoria smiled as strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Alaric rested his chin on her shoulder. He looked healthy, vibrant, the grey pallor of death, a distant memory. Never, Victoria said, leaning back into him. Just looking at the view. It looks different from up here. It looks better, Alaric corrected. Because you're standing next to me. He turned her around. His eyes, once so full of pain, were now full of peace. They are waiting for us, he said. The naming ceremony for the pups. Victoria touched her stomach unconsciously. She wasn't pregnant yet, but they were celebrating the pack's new births, a symbol of the future. Ready? She asked. With you. Alaric kissed her forehead. Always. They walked back into the hall hand in hand, the king who died, and the girl who refused to let him go. They were the balance, the power and the heart. And as they entered, the roar of the pack wasn't for the alpha alone. It was for the Luna who had taught them that even the smallest wolf can change the fate of a kingdom. Alaric was alive. But more importantly, thanks to Victoria, he was finally truly living. The story of Victoria and King Alaric proves that true power isn't determined by the rank you are born into, but by the courage you hold in your heart. Victoria, a simple Omega, defied an entire kingdom, faced down death, and battled betrayal to save the man she loved. She showed us that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most profound truths, and that loyalty is stronger than any poison. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance, danger, and werewolf drama, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more epic stories like this one. Don't forget to share this video with your friends who love a good supernatural romance and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new episode. Hit that notification bell to be the first to know when our next story drops. Thanks for watching.